Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of MHM. Today, not only am I joined by my co-host HB, who dedicated listeners to the podcast will know, we are joined by two amazing special guests, and I'm so excited for Heather to introduce them as we talk about the 2009 Pixar movie Up.
I'm so excited to talk about Up with these wonderful guests. So first of all, we have Anna Lauren Tufekci. Anna Lauren is a director, producer, and writer, and her work has been recognized by South by Southwest, Tribeca Shortlist, Annie Awards, IndieWire, New York Times, Amazon Prime, the list goes on and on. So we're super excited to have such an esteemed creative producer with us talking about Up today. And then our second guest is one of my best friends in the whole wide world. She's been on the podcast before, talking about Princess Jasmine, so you can check out that episode if you have not already. But we also have joining us Rani Jessica. So the bio could just be Rani is my best friend, but I'll continue. She's also an actor and a writer. She's worked at Lincoln Center, the Alley Theatre, the Denver Center, the Olney Theatre. The list goes again on and on. Their bios are also in the show notes of this if you would like to see the entire list of their
long list of accomplishments.
Beautiful, yes. But yeah, she's also a writer, and many big producers and networks have praised her voice. She articulates heroic leading lady ambition and the accomplishment of women of color who often get a backseat or sidekick attention in Hollywood, which I agree with completely. So proud of you for bringing that voice to the attention of the people who need to see
the masses. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also just want to give like a little like shout out like to what a great writer that Anna Lauren is, because she wrote that last line in my bio. So
hey.
Well, it's easy to write about you.
Oh. So we invited these two wonderful women on to talk about Up because it carries a lot of the same themes as their upcoming short film, Blackberries. So first of all, thank you, Al and Rani, for being here. How about you take this time to tell us a little bit more about yourselves and a little bit about your film, Blackberries?
Gorgeous.
I have a controversial way to kick it off, but I think that that's good.
Yeah.
Something that occurred to me just before we filmed this is like, I love this movie. I think it's so beautiful. And I think it's so sweet and darling to like tell a story about grief in a way that is not only like really impactful to adults, but very, very also impactful to children. But I think the one really important thing to think about, especially for Anna Lauren and I as filmmakers, is it doesn't pass the Bechdel test. Up doesn't, not Blackberries, but Up doesn't pass the Bechdel test. And for those of you who don't know, I have the definition of the Bechdel test pulled up, but it is a measure of representation of women in film and other fiction. And essentially, this test basically says that in order for a piece of film to pass the test, it has to have just one conversation between two women that isn't about a man. And even this children's film doesn't pass that test. And I think it's really important to draw attention to the fact that it is a story about a man grieving. And it makes me wonder, like, how would it be different if it was a story about a woman grieving? And I think as much as I love this film, Anna Lauren and I are really, really driven as filmmakers to tell stories that are about women, right? Because we're so conditioned to see the human experience through the male gaze. It's so much more palatable, even in a children's movie. And so I think Anna Lauren and I are so deeply passionate about making films about women. And in particular, right now, we happen to be really exploring themes of grief and female friendship in our work. And that's sort of what Blackberries is about. Blackberries in a lot of ways has a lot of similarities to Up, but it doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
Isn't
I
there only one?
Hmm.
Isn't his wife the only character in Up who is a woman?
And the mother, we see the mother for one moment at the end that she sort
Mm.
of waves at the pinning
Oh,
Oh
ceremony.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm aware of the Bechdel test and like obviously what it is, but to hear it out loud, my first thought was that's like the bare fucking minimum. And it's so hard for so many movies to pass it. Like
Mhm.
yeah.
because I don't know if we talked about this on the Jasmine episode, but I think even the live action doesn't pass because the conversation Jasmine has with her handmaiden person, her chambermaid, they also are just talking about Prince Ali.
Aladdin, yeah, or her father, or
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like a big thing for us is really wanting to like root out and tell stories about our communities. In particular, we're very, very interested in female stories and grief stories. And Anna Lauren, do you want to tell the story of the genesis of Blackberries?
Yeah, the Genesis. Yeah, the Genesis was Jess texted me in the middle of the night, but she was alas surprised to find me in overseas in Turkey, and it was not the middle of the night. She was like, "I had a dream where you directed the movie in my dream, and so you're gonna direct it, and we're gonna write it, and we have to make it happen." And I was like, "Great, tell me more." And then I announced it to the whole car of people I was driving to Istanbul with. It's like, I have a film I'm gonna make.
Wait, I didn't know that part of the
Childhood
story.
friend. Yes.
I
But the
love
film,
that.
I mean, to kind of like hone in on it, it's a short film about a mother who's seemingly in this euphoric day with her young daughter. And it's like you just completely fall in love with the child and the mother, and just the beauty and the magic of children, of childhood, of that perspective. And then she puts the child to bed, and suddenly there's an abrupt knock on the door, and a guest just barrels into the apartment and starts taking over the kitchen, cooking, making a mess of things, incessantly chatting. And she puts a pressure cooker on the stove, and this pressure cooker becomes a soundtrack of the tension between the two women. And the mother eventually kind of erupts, and the pressure cooker goes off, and the tension is broken as the mother's like, what are you doing here? You disrupted something, and you're going to wake my daughter. And then the guest just looks at her and is like, there's no one here but me and you. And so that whole time we're seeing this mother sort of encircled in the isolation of grief and trying to live out a truth that no longer exists. And the guest becomes the best friend who always was the best friend, who knows better than to knock. And we're seeing two women from different cultures show up for each other and sit down to eat the meal that the guest so meticulously and lovingly prepared for the mother, and essentially becomes the caregiver and feeds. And the whole thing ends with like a bit of a laugh sob and a bit of a coming together and unification in a time when I think we really need it.
Mm-hmm.
But also, as we get into it more and more, as I'm a mother of two, I have a little one who's almost two. I call him two because he's so big. He's a very big age. I just round up his age. He rounds it up to 5, which is the only number he can say. My daughter just turned 4 this past week, and children are so exquisite. Like, they're just so incredible. And in the story, they're just this incredible voice of truth, of reason, of freedom from ego and freedom from judgment, the judging mind, and all of this. Like, I just think whenever a child's in the story, they're just like the presence of who we all want to be, who we were in the past, And that's something that's like really kind of come to the forefront in this film and Up as we kind of unpack it. But grief, I mean, and sitting with grief and allowing grief to just kind of putting it out there and letting it be without trying to solve it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it just resonates very deeply. Heather knows this. Dedicated listeners to the podcast know this, but my grandfather passed away December of 2022, and then 3 months later my dog died. So there was a really long stretch of time, I think all of 2023, where everything for me was about like grieving and then also trying to like action my way out of grief, but that doesn't always work. It was on one hand great that I was still kind of able to function, but it got to a point where I realized I was trying to like escape the grief instead of sitting with it, feeling it, processing, allowing it to take up the space that it needed, and then letting it come and go as it needed to. And it's a really uncomfortable space to be in, but like my therapist reminds me, if you don't feel it, it's just going to build up, and then that's going to cause other problems and blah, 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 blah. So I'm really excited after hearing more about the short film. I'm really excited to hear it. I was tearing up a little while you guys were talking about it, but it not only the like female friendship aspect, but also it definitely sounds like a film created by women, for women, about women. And I'm a sucker for female friendship tropes and movies and media. So I'm very, very excited.
We will leave time at the end of this episode for you to let listeners know how they can support the film Blackberries.
Oh, great.
There we go.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So something that LB and I like to do on our episodes is kind of throw our guests into the deep end and have them give a little synopsis of the movie that we're watching. Since there's two of you, I will let you either tag team this or see which one of you would like to give a little mini synopsis of the movie Up.
So I'm gonna be real with you. My partner, I'm pointing down because in my Zoom screen she's below me, but she's smart. So I think the brains of the operation needs to do this one. That's my humble opinion.
I thought you were going to bring Babe into this or something. I thought the reveal was that Babe was on your lap.
He was going to do
My
it.
partner.
Babe is my dog.
Okay, how about we do this as, the supportive female duo, and I will take my best attempt, and then you can maybe fill in the blanks if I forget something juicy. Because really, snaps to your former guests on the podcast, they do a really good job of the synopsis. And I was like, and then when I heard it, I was like, oh, and I'm going to have to perform in under pressure. But Up is kind of, I think Up is such so it's such an easy film to kind of summarize because it's so universal and sort of the experience until the dogs come, then I got a little.
I'll handle the dogs part.
Okay, great. So we start with a young boy who's trying to find his way and himself. And he stumbles onto an old house, and inside is the most peculiar, the most incredible, the most different girl he's ever seen. And she has what he doesn't. She has clout and chutzpah and spark and everything he wishes he had and wants in his life. And so he just, right from the get-go, kind of follows her through the adventure of life. And I think the montage in Up is one of the best montages in all of film. It is so well done. It's so beautiful. It takes you through so many years and dimensions of a relationship. And it has it moves through comedy. It moves through really difficult topics like losing a child. And then eventually at the very end, we lose Ellie, the love of his life. I have to say my 4-year-old daughter was like, but Mama, why aren't they talking? I was like, because it's an exquisite montage, my chat.
Because we don't always need words. But it makes sense. She's 4. She's like, why aren't they talking? They'd always talk in movies.
Is the sound working?
Yeah.
And then, cut to now the world's most curmudgeon man, which I think, without commenting on the film, is just such an incredible starting point in a film, a starting point in meeting people, a commentary on life and not knowing what's behind the closed door. And this man is trying to preserve a time, a place, a home, an environment that is from another time. So the workers around his house are building, like evolving the space, building massive development, and he is trying to protect his home. But in the realm of grief, he is doing so with unkindness. And then comes Russell, who is like, Russell is the opposite of Mr. Fredricksen. Russell is a child who is free, a child who is unbound, a child who is naive to the constraints of his emotions and his situations. And he wants to help assist an elderly. What's the exact language? Assist an elderly across the street.
He's like a Boy Scout in the world, but I think it's a wilderness explorer. And
wilderness
he wants to get,
because they couldn't say Boy Scout.
Yeah. And he wants to get he has one badge left to get, and before he's like graduated or whatever, and he wants to get his assisting the elderly badge, and he's found this elderly man. And he shows up on his doorstep to say, "Excuse me, sir."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the elderly man that would least want his help.
Exactly.
The elderly man who shut out the world, who doesn't want help, period.
But who needs it the most. Yep.
But who needs
Yes.
it the most.
Yep.
And so
I'm gonna add one part to the synopsis. So an important part about Ellie and Carl is they have this dream to go to Paradise Falls together. And it's in the montage we see like that, like it's a big part of their relationship. And so after they sort of lose their child, they're looking for meaning in their life again. And so they make this decision to like go to Paradise Falls together. But life happens, and unfortunately that adventure never happens for Ellie and Carl. And so there's like this sadness to Carl, particularly after losing Ellie, but also that he loses this dream of going to Paradise Falls. And then, we forward, and now Russell is on the porch, and go ahead.
And Mr. Fredricksen wants nothing to do with it, and he gets upset, and some truck comes and like backs into his mailbox, and he's all upset about it, and he uses his sweet little cane, which later the balls come in handy, side note, and smacks the guy who's driving the vehicle over the head. There's a whole issue regarding this with the courts, and they tried to send him away to, what's the name of the elderly home, the care home? It has such a cute name.
Oaks.
Willowing, what about that?
That's some cute name. That's right.
That one.
So the next day when they go to take him away, he has schemed a plan, which, Russell shows up as he's trying to scheme his plan, and as they're trying to come take him away, and he asks Russell to go out and look for this snipe. And Russell's out looking for the snipe, and the guys are going to take him away, and Mr. Fredricksen goes back into his house to just gather his things, quotation, and suddenly, in the most beautiful moment of children's cinema, the house bursts with balloons, and Mr. Fredricksen say la vie and flies off into the sky. And then Rani, want to do part 2?
So adventure waits, like he's clearly on an adventure. He sort of references something on his mantle, like he sort of throughout this sort of second part of the film, the house is sort of personified as Ellie, and so he sort of communicates with the house like, Ellie, we're going to Paradise Falls. And so he thinks everything's great, and then all of a sudden he sort of hears, I can't remember, I think he hears something, and he like looks out the door, and poor little Russell is like, hanging on to the house.
Cutest animation.
And so then Carl's like, oh no, my plans are sort of foiled. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I think I'm gonna have to turn around and drop this kid off. And a big part of the thing is Carl has a hearing aid, and so he turns his hearing aid off because Russell's always like, it's funny. We have a character like that just natters on. And so Carl shuts his hearing aid off so he doesn't hear that Russell is trying to alert him that I don't think we're gonna make it back to town because there's a big storm coming. So there's sort of like chaos ensues, and Carl passes out, and Russell, being the brilliant wilderness explorer that he is, manages to navigate Carl and Russell and the house to Paradise Falls. So Carl comes to and he's like, where are we? Where are we? And sure enough, they're in Paradise Falls, but they're not quite where Ellie had always dreamed the house would be. In fact, they were like across the waterfall from it. So they go on a walking adventure to try and walk the house to the ideal spot. And as they're walking, Russell's a kid, he's got to pee, he's hungry. They take a little break, and Russell goes into the bushes to pee. And then while he's finishing up, he's sort of munching on his little chocolate bar. And this, another important part of the story that we forgot, we're rewind back. So Carl and Ellie loved this explorer as kids. And that's how they knew about Paradise Falls. They loved this explorer. And this explorer, Charles Muntz, he found this like insane bird, and people laughed him out of the community because it seemed so crazy. They didn't believe the bird existed, and the bird was the snipe. So the snipe has always is like in the story before we get to this point. But anyways, go back forward. So Russell is eating his little chocolate bar, and a snipe appears. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I think it's like so perfect and like such a great lesson that the snipe appears to Russell, and wholesome Russell.
Yeah.
So this snipe becomes friends and part of the crew taking the house to Paradise Falls. And the bird's name is Kevin. They also find out that Kevin is actually a lady and has babies. But then they discover another creature, and this other creature is this dope of a golden retriever named Doug, who has this fancy voice box on him, so we can hear all of Doug's thoughts. And very famous line, squirrel. And Doug happens to be part of a pack that is run by none other than Charles. So they're trying to get the house to the right part in Paradise Falls, but instead they end up running into Charles. And Charles is like, this is great. I get to meet my childhood hero. This is amazing. Except Charles is a little
good guy.
Not a cuckoo. Okay, Anna Lauren, you want to take it?
Oh, yes. Your heroes are not always who you expect them to be. Such a good point. Like, don't put anyone on a pedestal, kids. Charles is a very kind human being, and particularly to nature, and the voice of the colonizer, and the voice of the representation of the abuse of nature. And of course, the snipe doesn't want to come to him, so he's trying to find it, him, her, they. And once he realizes what is possible through his new friend or biggest fan, he tries to take advantage of him. And then how do we get to the moment where the house is attached to the blimp? I'm missing.
Well, because that happens because Charles ends up capturing the snipe. And
he lures him, right?
He ends up capturing him, and then Russell is like, I can't believe you would just give up Kevin like that. And so then Carl is like, you know what, whatever, let's just go on with what we're doing, and then we're going to get you home. And so there's like a moment of rest. And this is like kind of integral part, because what ends up happening is, there's like, the reason that Charles is able to capture Kevin is because Charles sets the house on fire. And so the balloons pop, a lot of things get damaged, and, Carl is devastated. And so he grabs, he's really devastated, and he's trying to hold on to like all his precious things. And he grabs this book that Ellie made for him, and it was their adventure book. And he's looking through these photos, and he always thought that the photo album ended before they went to Paradise Fall, and that the photo album was empty. But he opens it up and he realizes that Ellie finished the book. And to Ellie, the great adventure was life. Their life
Wait,
together.
that happens at the end though, no?
No, that happens before they go and save the snipe.
That is the most meaningful. I looked at my 4-year-old in that moment, and her eyes were full of tears.
It was so sweet. I was like,
Crazy.
I don't know why I was standing while I was rewatching it, but I was standing. I was standing for some reason, and I looked over at Tom, and we were both like,
Yeah.
Just
But-
sobs, openly weeping.
yeah, exactly. So Carl realizes he's made a mistake. He should have protected Russell. He should have protected Doug, the dog, who is also fallen in love with Russell despite his curmudgeon. And he should have protected Kevin. And so he goes out to tell Russell that, okay, we're on. And Russell is already like, Pete deuces, dude. He is on a leaf blower, and he's stolen a couple balloons, and he's going. So in that moment, Carl essentially becomes Indiana Jones, and there's a whole Indiana Jones sequence, and then
Charles falls to his
demise.
future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Born from Outlaw. And Kevin is saved, and the house gets to Paradise Falls, and the boys go home. And then the film ends. One of the pieces that we learn throughout the film is that Russell's father is kind of absent from his life, and Russell has these great hopes of his father showing up for his nature wilderness explorer badge pinning ceremony. And so one of the final moments of the film is Russell like waiting to get his pin, and then the like Boy Scout leader comes up and is like, is there anyone here to give it to you? And then all of a sudden we hear Carl, I'll do it. And so he pins the pin on him, and we see one shot of the mother being like, yay, old man.
And she's like surrounded by all the dogs that they have rescued now from Charles.
Right.
And then there's a montage of them playing games and loving on each other and getting ice cream.
Fenton's ice cream. Yeah, it's a really good way, I think, to end and again, just everything about the movie pulls at your heartstrings. So from start to finish, it's just well done storytelling in the sense of like evoking so many emotions, because the final shot then is the house that Carl basically had to let go of, but the house lands right next to the waterfall, right where Ellie wanted it, right where the picture that she had drawn and envisioned, and it's there. And that just makes me weep every single time I see it. I've seen this movie so many times. I haven't recently in the last maybe like 2 years, but that last shot just like
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic summary, guys. You did great. A+, amazing. I love the tag teaming, the teamwork, the support, and it was
The
great.
details. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little detail.
That's good. So
If you haven't seen the movie, now you have.
Yeah. Now you have.
Yep. And if you want to like listen to them tell it and watch it at the same time, get the full experience.
I mean, it was about the same length, let's be honest.
Next time. Yeah.
But I will say, like, that speaks to you both being filmmakers,
Yes.
and the fact that you have a movie that's coming out that is so similar. I think it just speaks to that even further. Like, here are the details of Up, you know.
Yeah. No, and I love hearing more about Blackberries because I remember especially watching it this time and because I'm not sure if it's just a content warning for folks who might be sensitive, a miscarriage, or if it's like infertility because they don't ever really have children. And I remember that kind of hitting me more so now that I am at the age where a lot of my friends are going through, something similar. And they don't really touch on her grief that much. I mean, they do. It's a montage. You can't really like take time on it. But yeah, so to hear that your film is kind of then taking that thread and expanding upon it, I think is going to be really impactful and helpful for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
I feel to that point, I mean, these things are like they're so isolating, and they're so done in secret and in silence. And there is something really beautiful in a children's movie to expose grief as something lovable. Because like you said, a miscarriage or infertility, it's such a quiet thing that isn't discussed because there's just maybe not a lot of language around it, and there's a lot of shaming, and like through just like the male corporate way that periods and pregnancy are doctored, etc. So yeah, I mean, and then congruently in Blackberries, it's just a very like once it's revealed that the mother is grieving and that she was grieving, she's completely exposed, and then you as an audience get to feel the grief alongside her. And I think that those moments in film are so strong when the character is going through something and you've been led through the journey with them and you go through that with them, like as their comrade. I mean, that's when we can understand each other through film.
Yeah.
And be there for each other.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I had never noticed, or like, so the last time I saw this movie was when I saw it in theaters, I think, or like
You're so classy.
I mean, I worked
15 years ago, Heather.
Yeah.
Yes, and
it came out when I was working at a movie theater. It came out when I was in college. And I remember seeing it in theaters when I worked at the movie. I may have seen it a few times in theaters when I was working at the theater. I remember the first 15 minutes absolutely wrecking me, but I didn't remember the infertility aspect of Ellie's journey. Like, it's not like upon this rewatch that I just did for the purposes of this podcast, I was like, I completely forgot about this. Like, and that's how I think it's a very important part of their story, but it is like so glossed over in that montage because it is very much like they're going through the life and they are looking at it through the lens of Carl's life and Carl's grief.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a major focus, but it is like I was just like, wow, I didn't pick up on that.
And I feel like it's a subtle layer of grief too, that Russell is the kid that comes into his life because he is very similar to Ellie just in terms of like his personality and his desire for adventure and camping, and he's a wilderness explorer, so I thought that was really really sweet. Quick fun fact about Russell that I like to throw in there whenever I talk about the movie is his character design is actually based on Peter Sohn, who is the director of Elemental, and he's done a lot of voice acting for movies in Pixar. And I got to meet him in person. And so seeing him in person and then watching this movie, I was like, oh my God, it's Peter. This is amazing.
That's so cool.
Wow.
And he's
so
the
cool.
most humble, one of the most humble, famous people, because you two are very famous and well accoladed. But I met him and I was like, do you know that you're Peter Sohn? Because you're just so nice. But yeah, so I actually learned about that in the documentary about the making of Elemental. And then again, when I got to meet him in person at Pixar Studios, which was really, 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 really cool. Anyway, fun facts.
So you got
it.
to have a positive interaction with someone you look up to.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So the movie did come out May 29th, 2009. Apparently, HB hasn't seen it since then, but that's okay. Well, what were some of your guys' first experiences seeing the movie?
Sorry to Tom. Sorry to my partner Tom. I was on a date.
Oh.
That's a cute thing.
Yeah. He was a interesting fellow. Yeah, I mean, I remember it's so funny that I haven't seen it in years because I remember being so deeply impacted. I used to love to buy DVDs, and one of the things about living in New York is like you're never stable. So unfortunately, my desire to collect DVDs, like the tangible things, has somewhat passed. I'm not even sure where that DVD is, but I remember sort of feeling so gobsmacked by that opening montage in
Oh my
particular.
gosh.
It's so amazing. But one thing I did, well, I'll circle back to this because I don't want to, I'll wait, I'll hold this thought, come back to me because I want to hear how about Al's first time watching it too.
Carl, are you sure? Because I'll never forget the first time I watched it.
Let's go. Let me.
I mean, it was a very clear moment in my university years. I was with a bunch of girlfriends in a basement, and we were all watching it. And I remember being so excited to see the film because I thought, just what a great concept to take my dream of flying as a child and put it on the screen. All I wanted to do as a child, I really sincerely believed as a child, tangential, but really relates to the whole conversation. I really thought I could fly. I thought, like, I can do this. Like, if I'm just so determined, I can put wings on and jump and away off my couch, and I will take flight. And I would practice over, and I would do it over and over and over again. Or I would like take an umbrella and run as fast as I can down a hill. And I just was like, if I will it enough, my feet will leave the ground. And alas, gravity is a physical thing that's real, but the magic of I think believing that you can defy something with something that is maybe seemingly not able to defy that thing. I think it's just like magical realism. There's just the beauty of filmmaking, and the way the balloons in Up are treated are so. I think you can feel that we said the film was 15 years ago. You can feel the CG, and I used to work in animation. You can feel in CG when it's a little older with the hair or like the water. Like sometimes Ellie's hair, I was like, oh, this is. But the balloons, the way the balloons are treated, and like as they pass over the sidewalks in the city, and you see the speckled colors below or the transparency of them, like they did the balloons so well, and it's so magical in those moments. Yeah.
And the
Because of the balloons.
music, the flourish of music that happens when the balloons are revealed, it's
Gore.
surreal.
That's
It's
gore.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely breathtaking, to be honest.
Breathtaking.
Like,
Yeah.
and also, Anna Lauren, I love that about you as a child thinking you could fly. It says so much about your personality and how you are where you are today. Like, I just feel like, it's like she believes she could fly. Look where she is now.
She's flying.
Now she's a director, right? And having that, like that spark of imagination and that desire to sort of push and make things happen. I think, this is Anna Lauren and I, well, we've known each other. This is just like a little tangential, but I think it's important. We've known each other since we were children. Her father was my singing teacher. And I also think she's an incredible, incredible dancer. So obviously she wanted to learn to fly. So she learned how to do it with her body, like leaping through the air. But this is my first time working with her. I've always wanted to work with her, but she is so, like, that's what directors do. That's what producers do. They make impossible things happen on impossible budget. So I'm also like so moved by that story because I think that's exactly who you are and what you do now,
I'm gonna fly. Thank you.
Rani, can you say what you were going to say before you asked?
Well, this is like kind of a little less uplifting, but I do think it's important. I think it's important to think about. Let's bring it down a little. Let's bring it down and talk serious for a minute. But the thing that I wanted to point out is like right again about Ellie's journey. I think it's it's like an interesting thing that most of the grief stories within the Pixar canon, other than I would say Turning Red, but even Turning Red is like a different kind of thing. They're all male centered. Coco, Finding Nemo to a certain
Mhm.
to a certain extent. I had another example. Luca,
Onward.
Onward.
Yes, I just watched
They're
that actually. Yeah.
they're all male centered grief stories, and it's so interesting to me that like throughout the sort of like the histories of modern American, and when I say American, I mean North American cinema, like it's why is it easier to engage in male grief?
Yeah.
Why? It's so strange to me.
Yeah. Because, like, for me, on one hand, I'm like, yay, yes, we need to highlight that men are allowed to express their feelings and they are allowed to grieve and they don't have to be so stoic all the time. And didn't realize this until you said it, but yeah, so much of the grief story is centered around men.
Mhm.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like now the movies that we're getting, like with leading ladies and their grief, it's all generational grief, like generational trauma and healing and things like that, which again is very valid. But I think it would be nice to have those experiences maybe swapped. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
As far as my personal experiences go, I was in 8th grade when this movie came out, and actually, I didn't get to see it in theaters because I don't know. I just never had the opportunity. And I was in DC for our like 8th grade field trip or whatever. So my parents waited to show it to me when it came out on DVD. Didn't give me any warning. They were just like, let's watch Up. We just got it on DVD. And I was like, oh, and they saw it in theater. So they knew what was coming. They didn't tell me. And we're sitting there watching it. And I was like so excited. And I was like, wow, this is so beautiful and amazing. Yay, adventure. And then she freaking dies. And I'm weep. Like I had to run to the bathroom and just sob in the bathroom for a good 10
Sweet
minutes to
girl.
recover.
Oh.
And then I came out and finished it. And then the ending, and I'm sobbing again. And then for years afterward, I would pop it on every now and then. And I was prepared. But like I had mentioned most recently, I haven't seen it mainly because of the grief aspect. Not that it's like a huge trigger in that sense, but it pulls on my heartstrings because Carl reminds me, oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. Here we go. Carl reminds me a lot of my grandfather, like old Carl, just kind of sitting in a dark house watching TV, just kind of like letting life pass him by a little bit. And so, oh my gosh, here we go. Ooh, hang on.
Oh.
Here we go. It's one of those, and the duality of grief, right? Like it's sad, but it's nice to have these memories of people that you loved and things that you cared about. Because what really hit home for me this time was when he's looking at Ellie's book and realizing that she did fill it out and that she was very happy and content with the life that she lived. And her little note, which makes me sob every single time, is, thanks for the adventure. Now you go have one too. And one of the last things my grandfather said to me was he had cancer. And so he knew the end was coming. And he just kept telling me, don't be sad because I've lived a good life. And I love that. I think on so many different levels, there as a society we have mixed feelings about death, but I hope that for a majority of us, wherever we are, wherever our timeline, ends and we transition or whatnot, that we can also say, like, I've lived a good life. I am satisfied and content with the life I have lived. And then on top of all of that, like I mentioned before, my dog died like 3 months later, and she and I had gone on so many adventures. We've lived so many lifetimes together. And so the double impact of both of those and watching this movie and it being about I've said this before on a couple different episodes, but there's something about old people and memories that just like really kick me right in the heart and just like throw me on my face and really like stomp on me. So this movie plus my personal experiences, and just life in general just like really, really got me in my feels. And I texted Heather and I was like, dude, I am weeping. And she's like, I tried to warn you. You know this was coming. And I was like, I know, but I wasn't prepared. So in that aspect, I do really, really like the movie and just how it serves as a vehicle for other people to be vulnerable and access their grief, which I think is really beautiful. And it's just a well animated, well written movie. Just, without all of the different deeper layers, taking that aside. But yeah, so big fan of the movie. And yeah, that's all I can say. Whew.
I think it's like interesting, the film really like drives home the point that like grief is a team sport. Like you
Yeah.
can't you gotta have your teammates with you. It's like, and that's so important. Heather and I, as best friends, have navigated a big grief year together too, which was what inspired Blackberries for me was like my own grief journey and my mother's grief journey as a young woman. We sort of both experienced grief at the same age, and that all of a sudden like opened the doors to my mother's experience to me. But I think, and I think again, also what Anna Lauren said is like, these films like these, like the reason that we make them is because like everybody has a story that would break your heart, and like I think something that Anna Lauren and I talk a lot about as filmmakers is that our why is always to sort of try to be in service, in some kind of service. And right now that just happens to be presenting in a desire to remind ourselves and remind each other that like we're all human beings, right? Like unity is so important. We're all made of the same human stuff, and every single person could tell you a story that would break your heart. And so anytime we can sort of connect with these like really human stories, it only does good. It only sort of uplifts us and boosts us. And that's something that Pixar has done such a great job of, is like telling these really human stories.
Yeah.
Something you just said kind of helped me see Up in a different way too, is like he didn't just go up in a house, he was like brought up out of his grief.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to the friends and the people that I have in my life, who I am a very internal processor, so I kind of like withdraw and kind of withdraw into myself. But I'm really grateful for the friends who try to bring me out of that, and not in like a dismissive way of like, just get over it and it's fine. Death happens all the time. It was very much like, hey, we're here. If you want to like just sit and cry for a little bit, if you want to get food, I also made some food, or I'm going grocery shopping. Can I bring you something? Just those like little ways of letting people know that you're there for them. Because I think Heather and I say this all the time, but at the end of the day, we all have as human beings a core need, a very deep need to feel seen, heard, and less alone. And like we keep saying in this episode, grief can feel so isolating, especially when it's around certain topics that don't get talked about enough.
On that note, I mean, as you're saying it, I'm just feel so compelled too that there is such an appraised individualism in North America, probably beyond, but I'm more familiar with North America, and my husband is Turkish, and it's not as prevalent in Turkey. And get through it on your own, like grin and bear it, and also like do the thing you dream of, like go to Paradise Falls, become a star, be the best in your sport, be the best in your body, and we get so focused on these things, or the messages that are told to us are like, that is a happy life, that is the ideal life, that's the best life. And then when something forces you out of individualism, or you're reminded and you become conscious, like grief, or the birth of a child, or the love of a dear friend, I think there is something exquisite about being conscious of the moments that actually do matter, like, and that what people have told us matter, that we're still here and we are still, our clock is moving forward and theirs hasn't. And they have left us with information and things, stories to impact us as we go forward. And often that information is my best moments in life were like tea with friends, holding your hands, watching you grow up. It wasn't the big things and it wasn't the individualism.
Mm-hmm.
It was like community, friendship, love.
Yeah.
Yeah. That really reminds me of a quote that Russell has in the middle of the movie when he's talking about the moments that he shared with his dad, because his dad is not very present. And he talks about going to the ice cream shop and sitting on the curb with him and playing that color game or whatever, which at the end he ends up doing with Carl. And that's why everyone cries, right? But Russell says, like, that might sound boring, but I think the boring stuff is the stuff I remember the most.
Oh, yeah. I love
I
that.
Teared up
one.
again now that you read
Chill.
it, so you know.
Yeah. It's the
It's true.
boring stuff that, I mean, like we talked about this in our soul episode as well. It's the little things. It's those little moments that we sometimes gloss over because of the individualism that our society has placed upon us of success. What does success look like? What should it feel like? Where is your money? Where is your partner? Where is your this? Where is your that? How long is your list of accomplishments? You know, like
Yeah,
Truly.
exactly.
and it's not about and what really is important is sitting on the curb, having ice cream and playing a color game, you know?
And again, one of those things where the both and can coexist, right? Like it's great and amazing to have these accolades and accomplishments, and it's okay to be very proud of it. And it's okay too if the things that you value most or more so in life are those little things. Yeah.
My partner and I have had a chaotic 2 years that has been like, the heartbeat of the 2 years has been like a lot of grief for us. But like in February, our car got stolen, and it
God.
was like, I know, it was awful. But we sort of came to this realization, like it was an awful situation. But when I tell you that every single person that could have helped us did, you know and my our first instinct was like, oh, why did this happen to us again? But then it was like, no, like, bad things happen. That is what life, that is a core central thing of life. But if people come to your door and they try and help, if you've got people calling, if you've got people checking on you, if you've got someone who knows better than to like wait but comes and shows up and feeds you, like that is a good life. The car might get stolen, the window might get smashed, people might leave you, but if you've got someone holding your hand at the end of the day, if you've got someone persistent enough to stick around, like you've got a good life. Like that's what it all sort of means. And that's really why I love movies, right? Can you think of anything more unifying than like a bunch of strangers sitting in the dark sharing a story together? Like it's so wild.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I think the big things, like just like Carl in the story of Up, the big things like the car being stolen or winning the award they or losing someone you care deeply about. I think the big things are actually the teachers that like bring us into more consciously into the little things. And that is like where life is actually lived. So the big things are just kind of like teaching us, moving us to different cities, to different places, to different emotional parts of ourselves so that we can be more conscious of actually like the little things.
Wow, that was so well said. That was beautiful. You should like be a writer or a director or something. I don't know.
Do you guys, I feel we solved a lot of things in the world today.
I think we did. I think we did. It's so funny. It reminded me when you're saying that, Nicole Kidman tells the story about how when she won the Oscar, it was the loneliest night of her life.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
the loneliest night of her life. And like it just shows like none of that stuff matters if you don't. It doesn't matter. You can literally win an Oscar and have it be the loneliest night of your life. Like that's wild to me, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Something I want to bring up, because we are talking a lot about having people and being lonely, is how you can maybe find those communities and find those people, because I think that's really important for anyone who might be listening, who might be feeling very alone and feeling very like, but I don't have anyone. So does anybody have any kind words or advice for how someone who might be feeling that way could seek community or resources?
You know, I always look to my brother when it comes to this kind of thing. You know, he's moved a lot and he goes where his hobbies are. You know, he's in his 40s and he's like he works this really stressful job and you know, he's always like loved music, and one way that he sought out to find friends is like he just like went in search of a bunch of 40-year-old dudes who wanted to play punk music. And now he's in a band and it makes him so happy. So I think I know that sometimes if you're lonely, that can seem really daunting. I think that like sometimes I think it's just as simple as like, you know, reaching out on social media. Like
Yeah.
and if you're super lonely, like just just say something. Just say something to anybody, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say that's like one of the more beautiful things about social media. It's not always a great place to be, but you can find people who have had similar experiences. Like Reddit, I think, is fantastic for that exact kind of thing. But also, too, just the fact that like you aren't alone. You may feel like you are, and that's totally valid. But we have these movies, we have these pieces of media that might explore what you're going through. And while the actors and characters might not be experiencing or navigate those situations similarly, it might be helpful to see those things and know that someone else is going through it, someone else has gone through it, they have survived, and you can too. And I think that's one of the things I personally try to do with my online presence is just helping people know that they're not alone, whatever situation or whatever journey life is throwing at them. Their feelings are valid. And yeah, what you said, Rani, that there is someone else out there who, again, will not be able to get it as specifically as you because no one else is living your life, but they might have a different perspective or might offer up a possible way that you can navigate a situation you've never experienced before. And I think that's one of, again, just going back to community and friendship and also kind of opening yourself up to other people, is that other people's experiences carry so much value, even if you can't directly apply it to your life. I think just having what's so beautiful about the world is the diversity, and we are all unique human beings, and we all have different ways of thinking and processing and experiencing things. A very long-winded way to say we're not alone.
I wonder too, like as you're saying, community, like kind of based on the way I'm growing, reparenting is a whole thing,
Yes.
and so watching the kids grow and learning sort of philosophies that are out there for their generation. There's a in the Waldorf education, there's a strong emphasis on contribution to the community, so responsibility, feeding the goats, whatever. But I see it in my own life too. Like if I contribute and feel a part of something, if I go help someone who needs help, or if I see a need in someone that I really love and care, and I go to them and feel like I just make them. I love baking. I love baking something for someone is and knowing that they like it and packaging it how they like it and tailoring it to them, it just takes the isolation out of things somehow. Somehow fulfilling the need in someone else. It kind of helps me step out like, oh yeah, oh, we need each other. Feels good to give.
Yeah. I also think feeling lonely can come and go in waves too. You know, just how grief can come and go in waves. All of these sort of feelings can come and go in waves. And You just kind of have to ride out those waves and do what you can to move through them.
Yeah. But like HB, you've said in many episodes, and Ronnie, exactly what you were alluding to, finding community is not about fitting in, but it's about finding people who accept you for who you are. And if that means, you know, looking for meetups online where they do in-person hikes or movies or, you know, D&D, or even, you know, Discord is a really big thing with this generation. There's almost a Discord for just about everything. And I know like there are new games coming out, like Baldur's Gate came out last year, and people will be on Discord like, hey, I want to do a session. Is anyone on here down? You know? So again, I think that's one of the beauties of social media and the internet. And if that isn't accessible to you, maybe, you know, finding things within the community. Public libraries are a great resource for these kinds of things, community boards, etc., etc. So yeah. Before we wrap up, I did have some questions about like if you guys have any favorite quotes, themes, scenes, characters from the movie, but is there anything else we want to add about the topics we've talked about today before we kind of segue into the end of the episode?
Anna Lauren, you said something so cute. Like you kind of briefly touched on like why Russell is so special and like why Russell's able to attract the snipe.
Because you set me up for that the other day. You were like, Russell, Ronnie said to me, which was so beautiful. You were like, he's like the one that is in service. He's the one that's like most kind of in touch. He's like the most conscious one of the whole bunch. He's like, even though he's seemingly has discord within his mannerisms, he's the one that is. He's like, he's the healer. He's the healer. So Ronnie and I were laughing about like, who are you from the Disney movies? Like, what princess are you? And then I was like, Russell. I esteem to be Russell. I'm not Russell yet.
Yeah,
but we all have
Russell...
a Russell within us. You know, we all have that child, helper, healer. Yeah. And he's accessible to us whenever we need him.
And being in service. I think that's such a beautiful thing that you just said. Really, the best thing you can do for yourself is like is be of service in some way to others. You know, like if you're really lonely, like how can you help someone else? Like that's what Russell does. Like Russell is so pure. Like he's such a beautiful, pure child, right? Like he's holding this grief for his father. You know, he's holding this loneliness for his father, and he sort of puts it back into the into the environment and into Carl and into Kevin. And I do think we have not talked enough about Doug, but you know there's
I
a lot
agree.
of people
I was gonna say the parts of the movie are very anti-dog propaganda. They have such like the Rottweiler, and then whatever it's not a Rottweiler, the main lead dog, I can't remember what, Doberman. Yeah, like they have such bad reputations as being like bad dogs or whatever,
like really aggressive, vicious dogs.
Yeah. And they're not really. So
no, they're sweethearts. And as someone who's in like the pet food industry, just pet space, dog space in general, like I've met a lot of Dobermans and Rottweilers and really, you know, pit bulls even, and they're nothing but sweethearts. And there's no bad dogs, it's bad owners. That's my little plug for that.
Yeah.
Ronnie and I talk about that all the time.
As someone who has always had like bad dogs that are good boys, like yes, there is no, my dog upstairs is like if a bat and a dinosaur and a shark and a gremlin were put into a little like Jack Russell body. Like he is a bad dog by nature, but I don't let him, he's on a tight leash, that boy.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of pure of heart, Doug is very pure of heart. I mean, one of the first things he says to Carl is, I have just met you and I love you.
Dogs, we don't deserve them. They are the angels of this earth, and I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to exist in the time that I do, where we have domesticated dogs, and we don't just see dogs as like, working animals really, because It's like the unconditional love that is just so beautiful and so amazing. And I'm not gonna cry this time. But you know, even though I have lost my dog, she lives on in my tattoo, but also I think in my cats, because it's really cute. Anytime I come home, they hear the key in the handle, they'll come running down the stairs. Like I hear their little thumps down the stairs and they'll greet me and say hi. So not just dogs, cats are amazing too. Heather knows how I feel about like all the anti-cat propaganda in a lot of movies. So in some ways, I like the anti-dog propaganda because it kind of offsets all of the cat stuff for me. But I agree that I don't love they're using dogs that are typically seen as more aggressive and vicious as the aggressive and vicious dogs. But naturally, they had to make Doug a golden retriever, so you know that just makes sense.
They just got to go with the stereotype.
I'm seeing a movie tomorrow at Tribeca that is by an Asian filmmaker starring Margaret Cho that was inspired by the loss of his dog.
Oh God.
Yeah, I know. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be really special. It's like it's dealing with his mother issues. Margaret Cho plays a character much like his mother, and about the loss of his dog. And he lost a dog while he was writing the film, and then while he was making the film, he had to put down another dog.
Oh my God. Dang, that's rough.
Awful.
Yeah. Pet grief is like a whole other different kind of grief too. So
Yeah. Rani and I both also lost dogs last year. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So hard. It's so hard. Does that mean your guys' favorite character, I'm assuming, is either Russell or Doug? Is from what our conversation is today. No. Ooh, tell me more.
No. I'm shaking my head because it's impossible to choose between them.
Fair. Yeah.
But honestly, I think it's Russell. I love Doug, but I think it's Russell. Russell is the purest of heart.
Yes.
You know?
Agreed.
Yeah, same to you. Who's your favorite?
Yeah. Russell. Definitely. Also, he's just like the cutest little Asian child. How can you not just want to like pinch his little cheeks and just hug him?
He was reminding me a bit of the future of one of the boys I babysit. He's a little Asian baby.
Giant hair.
And he's just so
round. I know.
Oh, sweet and round. Yes. My favorite character is Kevin.
I love Kevin.
I love Kevin. I love Kevin's babies. I love that. I guess Russell finds out that Kevin's a lady because Kevin has babies. Is that basically how?
Yeah.
But I just love how Russell is like so quickly and easily changes Kevin's pronouns when he discovers that Kevin is like Kevin is a ladybird, and then just like starts calling her she. And I was just like, wow, how simple it is to change someone's pronouns.
Right? Look how easy it is. Wow. Amazing.
But I also have a fun fact that is, some people may know this, but in college we used to have themed parties because I was a theater major, and the themed parties you like had to dress up or you were not allowed in, and they had a Pixar party and I dressed up as Kevin for the Pixar party. Yeah.
Icon.
Shit. This was before I was a cosplayer, so like if I did it now it would be much more elaborate, but I just wore this like sort of paisley colorful dress, and then I wore a Mardi Gras mask backwards on my head. So yeah.
I need photos.
I'll see if I can find some. I'm sure they're on Facebook somewhere. Yeah.
I honestly, like, just take this suggestion or leave it. I think like that should be the promo image for this episode is Heather dressed as Kevin. I mean, it's just, maybe we're all.
I agree.
All right. I'll find it. I'll dig it out of the archives.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay. I wanted to share that my favorite thing that I took away from this entire movie is that life does not end after loss. And not only that, but you're never too old for an adventure, and it's never too late.
Yeah.
You're never too old, and it's never too late. Yeah.
I love that. Cause like we talked about earlier in the episode, adventure isn't always this like big grand thing. Adventure could just be the life you're living. And life doesn't end after loss. That I feel like has so many different meanings for me anyway, of like having lost people, my life is still going. And in some ways, me sharing memories about them or seeing pictures, like their life is still continuing through those memories. I was going to share something that's not my experience, but a friend's, one of the guests we've had on before in our Enchanted episodes. Her name is Emily. She lost her mom a few years ago, and I really admire the way that she finds ways to kind of honor her mom in so many different ways, whether it's like going to, you know, some of their favorite restaurants, or she most recently got a bunch of tattoos for her mom. And I think it's always really special when she takes me to a place and she tells me about how she and her mom used to go here all the time and the memories that they have. And in a lot of ways, it like, I didn't really know her mom very well, but it feels like I'm getting to know her through, you know, these experiences. And I think that's really sweet. And another lesson from Onward, which we'll talk about in another episode. But yeah, thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that message and takeaway.
When I lost my grandma in October, I didn't know, it was very hard to grieve because I was in the middle of like a really big period of my life. Like I was doing really big things. I had just met Tim Curry the day that my grandma died. So
Mhm.
I was experiencing too much at once, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And so my grief felt very externalized. Like I felt like it wasn't happening to me because I had to finish my con weekend after getting this news. And something that really helped me was one of my friends just asking me to tell her more about my grandma. She was like, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And then I just would share. I was also just unpromptedly sharing. And that was also helpful for me to just, because my grandma loved Halloween and she died in October. And so I was just talking as much as I possibly could about how, like, you know, she would have been so happy that I was dressing up for fun that weekend and that kind of stuff. And it was a very, very surreal experience. And it was a way that I had not experienced grief before. I think that's a note too that we can make before we wrap up is like, your grief will not be the same every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you may have think that you have lost and you know what it feels like, but different people mean different things to you. They hold different weight.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Other people around you might also be grieving, because that was also my thing, is like, it was my mom's mom. So I felt like, you know, not that I couldn't be grieving also, but it was more like I need to be strong for my mom because she needs me right now. You know, she just lost her mother. I just lost my grandma, but it was her mom. You know what I mean? And so like those add complicated layers to grief as well. So I think that, you know, that's something to keep in mind too as you move through life, is you may think you know how something feels because you've been through it before, but it's different every time.
Oh yeah. Like when my grandpa died, we knew he was kind of nearing the end. And so I had time to kind of prepare for it. But with my dog, it was kind of, I wouldn't say it was sudden. She was 14. So like we knew she was old. She was blind. We think she was losing her hearing a little bit, but it really started with like a bunch of seizures. So March 1st, seizure, March 26th, we had to say goodbye. And sometimes I feel a little guilty that I cry more about my dog now than my grandfather sometimes. But yeah, exactly to your point, like grief is not just grief. Just like anything, depression is not just depression. Anxiety is not just anxiety. It's so nuanced and multi-layered and multifaceted. And I think when we can accept that, because it might be really hard to do so, it can make the journey easier. I'm not going to say it makes it easy, but it can, I think, alleviate a lot of the pressure that like we need to go through all 5 stages and then we'll be okay. You know, like it's more fluid. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So yeah. Before we end the episode, can you please tell our listeners how they can support your short film, where they can find you online and things like that?
Well, we're so lucky. We've partnered with some incredible people to make this film. We're working with the incredible production team at Cal Media, which Anna Lauren is part of. You can follow them on Instagram. I think it's calmedia.tv is their Instagram handle. And
We can also put all of this in the show notes too. So yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
great.
mm-hmm.
Yes. Amazing. And we are also working with the incredible production team, G Productions. You guys should check out their film that just sort of swept at Tribeca called Land of Gold. It's on HBO. And we've partnered with this great organization called Creative Visions, because the core of Blackberries is a story that we hope will be of service. And we're currently in the fundraising process. And so we will give LB and HB the link if you feel at all, no pressure at all. If you feel inspired to donate, we would love to have you as part of our team. And all of our donations, because we've partnered with Creative Visions, all the donations are tax deductible. And yeah, and you can follow AL and I on Instagram, or check out our website. And yeah, we're really, really excited about it. AL has a lot of other incredible projects coming out soon. She's got a documentary and a feature, and so yeah, just making wonderful art.
I love it. We're so honored that you came to talk about Up on our little podcast.
Thank you so much. This conversation was so beautiful, and female friendships and empowerment and just all of I just love that the themes we talked about today, we are kind of embodying in this conversation, in this space right now. And I'm so grateful to see you again, Rani, but then also get connected with you, Anna Lauren. It was great chatting with you both. And I'm looking forward to your short film, seeing it, supporting it, sharing about it. So just wishing you guys all the best. And I hope you know you have my support.
Yay. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, we will talk to you next time. Have a great rest of your day, evening, wherever you are. And yeah, be sure to follow these amazing ladies. Give them all of the support that you can.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast, and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebit_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.